I recall the moment when the word nobody got its filthy claws into my chest, like a splinter that you just cannot dig out. It was hot July in Savannah, Georgia, and the dining room chandelier of the Morgan family was issuing perspiring halos against the crystal stemware. Callie, my 6-year wife, was seated on one end of the mahogany table, rolling the diamond on her ring finger like it was a screwdriver, trying to put a screw to the end. Her mother, Diane, tossed her linen napkin, leaned forward and said in a voice thickened with years of Southern decorum, "Ethan, dear, you have to agree it would not do to keep Callie shackled to a nobody." The latter 3 syllables lingered on air more than the aroma of Diane's signature gardenia perfume. Nobody refuted her. Not Callie. Not her brother called Preston, who smirked down at me across his Napa Cabernet. I felt as a boy again at that moment, its smallness and awkwardness. This poor foster child, who felt that he might never have won any seat, least of all at this high table with its crown moulding and ancestral portraits. I tried to hold an expression that was thin, but had an edge of a smile, jeered and thrust a bit of salmon. I was long past tasting home and got the insult down the throat the way you get a fishbone down the throat. Gingerly and with pain, and hoping that nothing important will get tore on the way down. I was a child born in a small town in Indiana that you most likely have seen through the window of a greyhound. My mother passed away due to aneurysm at the time I was 2 years old. My father self-destructed in alcoholic oblivion prior to my completing 5th grade. I rode through 3 foster homes, finding out early that unless you make a bunch of sound you can get away with it. The adults might even forget to toss you out of the boat. I became tall, withdrawn, and always at the fringe of a photograph of someone else. Books were my saviour. Paperbacks were the scenes in which the nobodies could transform themselves into somebody with only a drop of grit or bravery or a sudden windfall inheritance. I always thought about myself of not becoming such a lucky hero of the story. However, it accompanied me when the world was painful. Years later, in 2014, it is possible to jump through time. I was 28, and I was a line cook at a restaurant in Indianapolis downtown that was known as Gusto. The afternoons of Tuesday were calm enough that the kitchen radios were louder than the sound of pans clang. A butternut squash risotto had just gone on the plate when the hostess appeared in the pass-through and told me, "Table 12 would like to come over and talk to the chef, to him personally." 12 was Callie Morgan, blonde waves pinned tidily behind her with a tortoiseshell barrette, with freckles over the bridge of her nose, and such deep dimples that possibly they held secrets. She was dressed in a word-dressed navy blazer and spoke in well-polished tones, which made me sit up straight, with no idea why my posture had changed. She added that the risotto was like autumn learning to sing, and I found this funny, since no one said something like that to me about my food. She wondered whether I have ever thought about doing some private catering. I did not. But when she passed me her embossed business card, Callie Morgan, event designer, I told her I would think about it. I would think about it all night, which meant I would think about her. In 2 weeks, I was catering a charity gala that she produced. By the dessert, pumpkin creme brulee, she was inquiring what type of music I enjoyed. The following morning, we were sharing a cinnamon roll in a corner cafe and smiling as though we had found out something the world was yet to hear about. After a half year, we went to Savannah, where Callie had a chance to launch her own boutique firm. Savannah. Spanish moss on the live oaks, cobblestones all of which never dry out, sweet air with the smell of sugar and river water. I worked as a sous chef in a historic inn, and Callie's social connections were even increased. In the first Christmas, her parents came visiting. Diane went over our rented flat like a jeweller over costume pearls. Mark, her father, was not at all like that. Bearded, gentle voice carried peppermints in the back pockets of his blazer. He put some sincere questions to me. How did I sauce that pork with sage and brown butter? Did I miss winter in Indiana? I said to him of the foster homes, of reading Treasure Island by the dim light of a shabby quilt. He was a listener, just as though I mattered. The next spring, Callie and I were married in Forsyth Park, under a gazebo constructed of iron and covered with wisteria. The Morgans had not spared any expense. String quartet, special lace veil, a cake which had all the appearance of being edible architecture. None of it was my money, so I had zero power when Diane said that we were going to invite 0 icons of my past. No offence to Ethan, she said. I mean, a policed guest list photo's so much better. I said to myself, it was her dime, her decision, bit the bullet, and smiled in photos. Marriage felt like Sundays in Tybee Island, kisses that tasted like sea salt, and restaurant napkin scribblings of how we were going to open farm-to-table bistro together. However, when we went to Morgan family events, I was a suit 2 sizes too small, on rent, and had to look good, just not breathe. Diane would tell compliments, followed by corrections. You talk like a professor because you are self-taught. I like your economy, but of course, Callie is used to some comforts. Tiny paper nicks of otherworld consciousness that I made pretense not to not feel. Callie began to commence the project late with a new customer, a tech startup firm that was opening an eco-luxury resort 3 years into the project. She was home with a new scent of a sandalwood cologne. She would never tell me any story of the meeting when she got asked how the meeting was, but she will just tell me the metrics and the budget. I attributed it to meeting deadlines. Up till a Thursday, our electric bill was appearing uncashed. I did the books the old-fashioned way, with simple spreadsheets, but there were 2 questionable cash withdrawals of respectively $800 and $1,200 in the joint bank account. Callie grumbled about vendor emergencies and assured that she would have it replaced. Replacement never followed, and in its place, distance came. She answered phone calls on the balcony with screen light pressing against her cheek in a secret. During dinner time, she placed her phone face down. When I touched her hair behind her ear, she drew in like it was a shock she had received unexpectedly. October 17th, 2019. I had changed shifts to make homemade gnocchi as a surprise to Callie. Candlelight, Miles Davis, the entire cliché about romance. She sent a text message. I am late. Take no wait. There came a hollowing out of the inside of me. I called her office building and drove there. I could feel my heart pounding so hard that I could just taste metal. There was hardly anyone in the parking lot besides the Lexus that belonged to Callie and a smooth black Mercedes. On the other side of the lot stood the creative director of the resort, initially introduced as Beckett Hale, the towering but chiseled man who always wore a slim-fit suit, smoking clove cigarette naturally. Callie came out a couple of moments later. He opened the side door and put his hand on the small of her back in the manner in which I used to lead her through crowds. She laughed, and it was as the pouring of a drink. In a wary trail, I went to a small hotel by the riverside, saw them pass keys, observed elevator doors glided shut before them as though they were metal jaws. That night I did not tell her off. Well, I got in my car and driving around thinking I was heading somewhere, until my gaslight turned orange and I pulled up at a Waffle House and tried to recollect breathing. Early in the morning I went home. The other half of the bed that belonged to Callie was still lying empty. At 6 a.m. she crept in, her sneakers spotted with mud, as though she had run in the morning. I pretended I was asleep, however. One tear gave me out, It smeared upon the pillow. 2 days after that, I would wait until she took a shower, opened her laptop, and I knew the password. It was our wedding date. Emails, hotel receipts, a chain of texts as a novella of betrayals. Beckett. Are you sure that your 0% husband will not notice about the cash being gone? Callie. He is too busy making scallops sauté to check. Beckett. You want somebody that would be able to pay you. I finished with trembling hands the closing of the laptop. The words were not mere hurtful, but also confirmed all the fears that I was not really a part of my life, but an imposter. That night, I placed 2 cups of chamomile tea on the counter, because I could not chew and swallow wine with thinking of her lips on another glass. I gave her to understand I knew. The fib rolled right out of her mouth without forethought, saying that the receipts were for business suites. She made room reservations on behalf of employees. I passed the printed messages towards the counter. Her atrophied face turned pale. Hours were spent in opposing arguments. Me entreating at honesty, she on invasion of privacy. When she eventually confesses the fling, she puts up the excuse on a single cold statement, and that is, Ethan, I love you, but Beckett can land me where you cannot. That evening I went into our spare room. The bed was its own penance, each near rack of a floorboard, a sharp reminder that I was but a lodger in a house which I helped erect. In comes Mark Morgan, father-in-law, the defunct real estate mogul with peppermint pockets. One afternoon he appeared with a 6-pack of root beer he remembered that I did not drink. We would be sitting on the porch steps with gnats buzzing like static. I thought he would stick up even for Callie, even propose a large cheque to a silent divorce. Rather, he sighed and replied, My daughter is committing the biggest mistake of her life, and somehow you are footing the bill, Ethan. The question he put to me was what I needed. I told him I was unsure, somebody to make sure I was not going crazy. His gnarled hand was on my shoulder. He said, You are a good man. Not on that story my family is going to rewrite. Several weeks later, he took me luncheoning by myself. Around shrimp and grits, he informed me that he was a victim of stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The physicians awarded him a year or less. He addressed one with the cold impersonality of a physician reading in a physician an outside stranger his own diagnosis. I have few joys to look to now, he said, but the way you handled Callie, even when she was foolish, that tells me that the world is not goodless, after all. He even reached to the leather briefcase and took out a manila envelope which has my name, handwritten, on the front side. Keep this in safekeeping. Not even Diane does know. I took the envelope out of the envelope without reading what it contained. Judge. It was more of a verdict hearing when Diane threw a family brunch when Callie made a separation filing in January. She had marbled-sized pearls, said so, addressing me as though dictating a memo. It would be best all around, Ethan, including your self-respect, that you sign now and go Heine and resign. Preston snorted and muttered, where you can spell dignity. That was when Diane referred to me as a nobody in my face. The family assented. Jury went with it. As I stepped out into the moist savannah air, the word nobody rang in my ears with every step. Low grey skies were sheet metal in March. Mark became slender, and yet retained the glitter in his eyes. I used to go there each week on a Tuesday. We did baseball. We talked about dives he attempted on business excursions. Did I keep, he said, that envelope? I nodded. He put his hand in mine, the handshake of confidence. He passed away in the early hours of 2nd of April. 3 hours later, Callie texted me. He died, Dad. It was family at home. Please do not complicate this. I honoured her desire, up to the funeral service. The church itself was stained glass and choked snivelling. I was there in the back pew, invisible and yet not invisible. Despite the fact that Diane painted an oration about her husband as an industry titan, she failed to mention that he was also a man carrying candy on behalf of kids that were not his own. I kept waiting at the grave after the burial, when I was alone with the groundskeeper. I thanked the granite marker, dropped in a peppermint, and made the solemn pledge to look in the envelope as soon as I should have the means. After 2 weeks, the Morgans moved to the mansion to read the will. I was not invited. One of my friends alerted me that Diane was going to take up the running of Mark affairs behind his back. There was a bit of sick turn in my stomach. The envelope seemed heavy. I came there nevertheless, in the only suit I had. The security guard at the gate directed me that it was a family event. I submitted my ID, stated, Mark Morgan thought of me as a member of the family. He even told it to me. There was in the living room an air of Sotheby preview, gold-leafed oil paintings, antique Persian rugs, etc. The family was seated in semicircle around a mahogany coffee table on which a young attorney was shuffling papers. In each of the Morgans, all eyes turned towards me, surprise, honest indignation, in Diane even a flash of fear. "This is not proper, Ethan," she said, her lips compressed tight. I paid no attention to her, but turned to the attorney and said, "Had you got the latest will of Mark?" He inclined his head, received a stapled packet. "Could you tell me it is the correct date?" I asked. He flipped the initial page. March 20th this year. I took an envelope out of my inner pocket and opened the seal. One of mine is dated March 23rd. Sign and seal they were before the notary at Memorial Hospital. There was a gasp of amazement. It is a pearl necklace that tightened on the neck of Diane. The lawyer matched the signatures, dates, seals. In law, the latter was dominant over the former. He had cleared his throat. According to the last modification of Mr. Morgan, his own personal estate, liquid $8.4 million, is willed by him to... He stopped in blinking, thinking, Ethan Carter. Diane jump up. That's absurd. He hardly knew the man. The lawyer went on, in louder tones. To Ethan Carter, subject to the provision that he should erect and control a culinary scholarship fund among the underprivileged young people. Preston sputtered. That is something Dad would never do. Softly, I interrupted. She would. We discussed the foster system. My words shook, and I continued. According to him, every child should have a place on the table. Callie looked at me with mascara running down her cheeks, and not all of it was bereavement. She was crying either at her father or the fortune flying away, I could not guess. I did not crow. I was not smiling. I just folded the will, put it on the coffee table and said, Mark had faith in me when nobody else had. I will do that with honour. It did not take long before the gossip machine was running in Savannah. They used to talk of the chef inherited millions. Old workmates posted congratulatory messages which littered with loan requests. People I did not know contacted me through social media using the excuse of close family ties. I disregarded the majority and concentrated on paperwork. I was able to establish the Mark Morgan Culinary Pathways Foundation with the assistance of the attorney. The initial scholarship was given to a family of 2 siblings living in a foster home in Macon, where they were both the same age, at which the system had classified me as being at risk. Money did not wash away the risk of betrayal, however. It helped me get some time to recover. I occupied a low-rise building on the riverfront and used to prepare simple food and visit a therapist who assisted me in unravelling why the world nobody hurts so much. Once, having sent an email with the subject line closure, Callie took a step towards it. I read it and felt the old ache, but kept still. Not all of those doors can be closed once they are slammed. In December, a cream-coloured envelope was handed to him. Diane had written the flap in her cursive. There was no apology in the letter, but rather a request. I asked myself whether I could think about returning one of the vintage cars of Mark to the family. I sent back to him one peppermint by mail. I opened a diner I had closed on the fringe of town and renamed it Peppermint and Rivets, after Mark's pocket candy and the beams of a bridge viewable through the window views of my booths. The diner had developed to become training grounds to scholarship students. Our food was posh comfort food at a low price. Croquettes of shrimp and grits and pot pies filled with tomato bisque, bourbon pecan waffles. Each plate went out of the pass-through with a scrap of Mark legacy. When I was closing up last week, I also noticed a teenage boy after wiping a table longer than he should have. He admitted that he had broken a plate on service, having hunched his shoulders in anticipation of rebuking. I gave him a peppermint and said, "Accidents are not able to define you, kid. What you learn out of them does." His face creased into a smile of relief, and in it I saw the face of my little boy, the boy who was afraid to break anything because he felt that he was already broken. I closed up, went out on the street, where the river wind was blowing sea talk in the live oak boughs. Stars above me poked holes into the southern sky, each memory that, no matter how dark a canvas it is, it cannot swallow all the points of light. I am yet to get used to the word millionaire. I like mentor, chef, or plain old Ethan. I am no longer somebody. I am a man charged with a legacy of faith, and I am given testimony that there are times when the silent soul, way back in the back row, sits on the turning point of the story in a sealed envelope, which he cans till the right time to crack open. Liked my story? Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to more of such real-life stories.